Good morning, piano parents. I'm so frustrated I could almost cry. Don't you feel sorry for me? Everybody get out your tiny little violins. This is the third time I'm trying to record this episode. I thought it would be cute to record it outside on my patio, but my phone got too hot, and so I thought I recorded it, and then I didn't record it. And then my neighbor's dog was barking, and my other neighbor came outside, and I was self-conscious, and so, okay, that was take one. Take two, I decided, all right, I'll go back in my studio, but I'll try to change the setup so you have something different to look at, and the natural light can show on my face, because that's supposed to be better video quality. And I thought I did a good job the second time, and I went to edit, no sound. I think my microphone that I've been using for the last several years finally went kaput. So the sound quality on this may not be great, but if we have any sound at all, I'm going to be grateful. In fact, I feel like I should stop right now just to double check. Hold on. Okay, phew. I scared myself again because I had to change the settings for the audio on my computer. I thought I still didn't have sound, but we're good to go. So, on with today's episode, which has to do with practicing. And maybe I should do an episode about the frustration of trying something and it not working. Have you ever felt that, where you've tried to play a passage and for whatever reason it just won't work? I'm on the verge of tears right now. This is something I want to do, something I've set aside time to do, but the technology is not cooperating. Okay, you can send me a bill for this therapy session, because after talking to you, I'm sure I will feel much better. We are talking about practicing today, but actually, before I get into today's topic, I do want to give a shout out, a thank you, call attention to the fact that one of my listeners, dear Karen, another Texas teacher, reached out to me after the last episode and asked me about the 5-minute rule. And honestly, I couldn't remember what I had said about a 5-minute rule. So I went back and checked the transcript, and sure enough, I had just barely mentioned just a quick little passing thought of a 5-minute rule having to do with practicing. And really, honestly, Karen, it's not exactly a rule. I kind of borrowed this from James Clear, who talks about doing something that will remove the obstacle to what you really want. He talks about building habits, and if you're wanting to maybe start a new workout routine, sometimes the hardest thing is just getting started. So your first goal can be just put on your running shoes. And once you've got your running shoes, the idea is that, okay, now I'm dressed, I may as well go ahead and do the thing. And my thought with that 5-minute rule was just get your kid to the piano. And maybe they'll be okay with 5 minutes or even 1 minute, whatever it takes to get your kid to the piano. And then maybe the timer goes off, their 5 minutes are done, and they're out of here. Or maybe they've kind of invested, you've gotten over that hump of getting to the piano, and so they'll spend a little bit more time practicing. So that's the idea of the 5-minute rule. Maybe for your kid, it's a 1-minute rule. Maybe it's just go sit down for 10 seconds. But you build on that success, you getting your kid to the piano, your kid actually following your instructions. Let's build on that. The next time, hopefully, it will be a little bit easier to get to the piano and get your practicing in. So thank you so much, Karen, for reaching out and asking me to clarify what I meant about that 5-minute rule. It means so much to me to know that you're listening. I appreciate it to get feedback from listeners and questions for clarification, or if you have suggestions, something you'd like for me to cover on the podcast, or even guest, if you would like to come on the show as a guest, I would love to hear from you. Or if you know of someone that you'd like to hear from or hear about, send that to me. You can reach me on Instagram at Piano Parent Podcast, or you can email me, Shelly, at pianoparentpodcast.com, or if you're Karen, a fellow teacher from Texas who has my phone number, she just sent me a text. Shelly, what do you mean by the 5-minute rule? So anyway, whatever works. Thanks for reaching out, Karen. Thanks for listening. And thanks for the clarification, which will kind of segue into today's topic. When you get your piano kid to the piano to practice, what if they don't know what to do? What does practice even look like? What are we supposed to do when we sit at the piano? Hopefully, your teacher gives you some sort of written instructions. I'm still old school pencil and paper. Actually, fancy colored pens. You can probably see, well, no, you can probably see over on my piano, I have a bucket of colored pens and markers, and I like buying, I like having the excuse to buy fancy pens. And so we still use actual pen and paper. Some teachers may be much more technologically advanced. Maybe they send an email, or they have a Notion profile for you, or Google Classroom, or there are other kinds of music studio communications, and maybe your teacher uses that. Whatever they use, read what they send you, and they may have some helpful tips about what to practice, certainly what songs to practice, and maybe some tactics of how to overcome, how to work through tricky bits within your music. Besides whatever your teacher has written to you, I've got 3 suggestions for us today that we'll talk about. One is just building the habit, the practice of practice. We'll also talk about the practice sandwich, and then finally we'll talk more about maybe goal-oriented practice sessions. So first of all, you've got to build the habit. I don't think students, especially very young students, I don't think they realize how much work actually goes into learning to play the piano. The concepts are not really all that difficult. If you can count to 4 and say your first 7 letters of the alphabet, those are some of the basic concepts of making music. But getting your hands to work together, letting your eyes track the music, and trusting your hands to find the right piano keys, that's eye-hand coordination is very complex. And it just takes time. You can't snap your fingers or flip a switch and boom, you know how to play the piano. Some people can, and we still try to be friends with those people. For the most of us, it takes a lot of work. And when your child is a very young beginner, their music is not terribly complicated, so it's not going to take them 30 minutes to get through all of their music. But you do want them to regularly spend some time practicing on the days between lessons. One rule that I share with my students is that I call it your age times 3. And so for a beginner student, maybe they're 5 years old, 5 times 3 is 15. And so I'll tell that mom to try to aim for 15 minutes of practice regularly, maybe not daily, but on a regular basis. And even those 15 minutes can be broken down into maybe 7 minutes before school, and then 8 minutes after you get your homework done, or something that works with your schedule and with their personality and their temperament. As I said, the beginning music is not terribly complex, and so it's not going to take a lot of time to get through those pieces, but we do want to build the habit and the recognition that you do need to spend time at the piano in between lessons so that you can start developing these skills. And then when your music gets a little more complicated and you do need to maybe, well, you're older, so we've got a larger number of minutes that we're trying to reach, but then you're going to need to spend a little bit more time figuring out the different tricky parts of the music. Along the lines of building that habit, you, parent, need to make sure that habit is taught. I said it's not like flipping a switch to learn to play the piano. It's not like flipping the switch for your child to just automatically go to the piano to practice. You signed them up hopefully they were involved in that decision, but maybe you decided piano was something important that you wanted your child to do. You've paid the teacher, you've hired a teacher, the teacher has made plans, but have you educated your child and let them know they've got part of the bargain that they need to fulfill too? And it's not just showing up at your teacher's house for the lesson. You have to train them about the practicing. Don't be shocked or surprised or blame them. Well, I signed them up for piano. I thought they would be interested, and they're not interested. They're not practicing. I can't get them to practice, so we're just going to quit lessons. Have you taken the time to teach them how to make that regular habit of practice? That's your responsibility and something that you can work through. So we've got to build a habit. Another strategy or something that you can consider when you're figuring out what to do when you practice, I call the practice sandwich. You may have heard of a compliment sandwich before, or maybe it's a criticism sandwich where you say something nice and then you say the criticism and then you say something nice on the other side. Sometimes people can see through that, and I wonder, maybe it would have been nice if you were just direct and gave me the criticism. I don't know how genuine I feel like your compliment was if it came on both sides of a criticism. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Talking about a practice sandwich, maybe your child starts with something fun, maybe a review piece or a pop piece, something that their music, something that they are excited to play, something they feel confident that they can play. And then after they do that to sort of warm up and get their fingers ready, then let's tackle something that's new, something that's a little more challenging. Maybe not the whole piece. Maybe we just work on a few measures, wherever that place is that I keep stumbling. Maybe just focus on that little bit. See if you can make some improvement, some intentional improvement to that section. Then when you're done with that, then you finish your practice session by going back to that first fun piece or a different fun piece. But you start with something fun, then do something challenging, and then you finish with something fun. So you can build a practice sandwich. Another way that you can practice, kind of break up your practice into different sections, is called interleaved practice. That's an interesting word. I don't know why. I'm not a fan of that word, but that's what it is. I've talked more about interleaved practice on the podcast before, and I'll link up that episode in the show notes for you. But the idea is that maybe you have 4 different pieces that you're working on. And so you start off your practice session maybe by working on this first one, and maybe it's a little easy, you've got most of that down, and then you spend a few minutes on your second piece. Maybe it's got a few challenges, and so you kind of work on that a little bit, but not too much, because then you move on to your third piece of music and then a fourth piece of music. Then you start over again, but rather than starting with that first piece, this time you might start with the second piece, then come to the first piece, maybe go to the fourth piece, and then the third piece. The idea is that you're mixing up the sequence and you're mixing up the parts that your brain is focusing on to make sure your brain is actually retaining this information. If you have a challenging part in this second piece and you drill it and you work on it and you focus on it and you play it 5 times in a row, and maybe finally by the 5th time you can play it and everything's going good, and then you go away and work on something else. When you come back to that tricky bit in that second piece, is it still together, or were you able to get through it accidentally? Your brain and your fingers didn't really retain that information. Interleaved practice is a way to force your brain to shift gears, force your brain to remember what it has learned, and then shift gears and be able to come back to that information again. I would say that that's probably reserved for more advanced students who are working on more challenging repertoire, but it might be a good thing to try with your younger student to see how they do with working on something they're familiar with. Okay, let's shift gears and play that tricky piece, then go back to something that you can play really well. Let's go back to the tricky one. Is it still, have you made some improvement? Can you tell? And that would be a good practice strategy. Your piano kid may be more goal oriented. And I'm not talking about just the goal of spending 30 minutes at the piano. With some of my students, we have specific goals depending on what time of the year, what season we're in the year. Well, if we're getting ready for a spring recital, you better know that the spring recital is top priority, and I have specific things that we want to do to that recital piece. We're not just playing it through and get from the beginning to the end and calling it done. No, we want to make it performance ready. So I need you to work on the dynamics. Did you start off softer and then build up and get stronger in the middle and then have a softer ending? Those musical expressions, those dynamics, are what makes your music so much more pleasant to listen to, so much more exciting for the audience. I don't want you just to be able to play all the correct notes and rhythms. I want you to give some emotion to your music. So that would be a goal when we're working on the spring recital. Currently, I have students, we're in the fall of the year, I have students that are working on the Fall Festival, which our local music teachers, East Texas Music Teachers Association, hosts every year. So they're working on their Fall Festival piece. I have some other students who are preparing for the Texas Music Teachers Theory exam. And I have some students that are doing both events, and they're within just a couple of weeks of each other. So we're sort of working on some other music. I tell them your priority is to do your theory homework and make these improvements on your Fall Festival piece. Outside of that, if you want to play some other music, that's great, but make sure you do this first. And I write that in their assignment. Some other students, I mentioned last episode that I have some students who are involved in the ballet, the Nutcracker Ballet that's taking place in Tyler. And so they have a couple of late nights where they're spending some extra time doing their ballet rehearsals. They have told me they're not going to practice piano those nights, but they'll make up for it on other nights. That's fantastic. For my part, I'm going to make sure that their music is enjoyable, not too challenging. I don't want them to have to spend a lot of mental energy focusing on piano when they're already spent with their schoolwork and those ballet rehearsals. I want to be part of the team. I don't want to add more friction to their busy schedule. I want to be a reinforcement and support for the things that they're doing and the things that they want to accomplish. Once the Nutcracker is done, then we'll give piano a little more priority and maybe work on some more challenging pieces. But for now, this season, we can let it rest a little bit. Have you ever heard of the expression "eat the frog"? Sounds kind of gross, but it has to do with productivity and the idea of doing the hard thing first. Get that out of the way, and now you can celebrate that's done, and then the rest of your time you can spend on other projects that you want to do. In regard to piano practice, maybe your child would do better when they're fresh, they just newly sat down at the piano. Maybe that's the better time for them to work on that challenging section. Once they get that done, they feel like they've made some improvement, then for the rest of their time allotment, they can just improvise or play music by ear or play pieces that they're already comfortable with, but you do the hard thing first. Maybe that would be something that makes a better connection for your piano kid. I said this earlier in the episode about it's your responsibility, piano parent, to teach your child the art of practicing, to help them build the habit of regular practice sessions on the days between lessons. It would break your heart if you sent your child to their piano lesson unprepared. They haven't opened the books all week because they don't have the self-discipline and you didn't remind them. And then they sit down at the piano bench at their teacher's studio, and hopefully your teacher is kind and gracious, but not everybody is kind and gracious. Is your piano teacher going to embarrass them or shame them or make them feel guilty and all kinds of awful things because they didn't practice the week before? Do you feel some responsibility for that? First of all, I hope your teacher is a very positive influence in your child's life. I hope you've got the type of teacher that is gracious and can speak encouragement and be uplifting to your child. When students come to my studio and they haven't spent any time with their books, then we just dust it off. Okay, let's practice together. Let's work on these things together, and I'll give you some specific things to work on at home this week. I try to be very gracious with my students. I don't want to do anything that would cause them more discomfort, cause them embarrassment, or anything like that. So I hope, first of all, you have found a teacher that is a good influence for your child. Second of all, I hope that you are doing your part to train your child to have those regular practice sessions at home. You don't want them to go to the lesson unprepared or feel bad about themselves. They already have enough negative self-talk, things that you probably have no clue about, the script that plays in their head. So we don't want to add to it. We don't want to give them something else that they can feel bad about themselves for. Yuck. I don't even like talking about it. Okay. I've got a couple more thoughts before we wrap up this lesson. Not every practice session is going to be amazing, outstanding, massive improvement on my music. Some practice sessions are going to be just ugly. Just get the time done, play through all of your assigned pieces, and we'll call it a day. And that's fair. That is reasonable. That is life. My pastor made an excellent comparison along these lines a couple of years ago when he was talking about our own personal Bible study. He said, not every time you sit down to read the Bible is it going to be some life-changing, revelation from above. Sometimes you just read the Bible because you need to read the Bible. And he compared it to eating meals. Not every meal that you sit down to have is going to be a 5-course feast or a banquet or a big celebration. Sometimes you just grab an apple and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and you run out the door. You've got to have nourishment. Your body has to eat, and you want to make the best choices you can, but sometimes you've just got to get it done. Sometimes with reading your Bible, you just get it done. I might listen to a chapter on my audio Bible on the way to work. I don't want every time I read the Bible to be that way. Sometimes I want to just actually open it up and maybe highlight a passage or make some notes or look up some different things. Sometimes it's a little more in depth. Not every conversation with my husband is roses and chocolates and sweet nothings. Sometimes we talk real sweet to each other, but sometimes it's like, did you take out the garbage? No, I forgot. Did you go get the oil changed? Yes, I got the oil changed, but I didn't go get gas. Or who's going to pick up something for dinner? It's just those real life, on the go conversations, and that gets you through until you can have the next beautiful eye-to-eye, face-to-face connection. Sometimes your piano practice is just get it done. It wasn't pretty. Maybe there was a little bit of crying. Maybe I don't know how to play this. Okay, we'll make a note to your teacher, or we'll try again tomorrow. But you just spend the time. You get it done. Other times, maybe you'll have these great breakthroughs, and your hands will all of a sudden know what to do. And that's so much to rejoice, so much to celebrate. But don't neglect the ugly practice because you're waiting for the fulfilling gratification of a perfectly played piece. Sometimes you got to do the ugly practice to enjoy the better practice. One last thing. Sometimes your piano kid may just need some external motivation. Maybe that looks like a practice chart with stickers in your home. Maybe 20 minutes of piano practice equals 20 minutes of TV time. Whatever works in your home, whatever communicates best with your piano kid, take advantage of that. But I also have an external motivator that might be something you and your piano kid are interested in. If you match the word piano with the word November, you get PIANOVEMBER. And during the month of November, I host a practice challenge where students can collect tallies, practice tallies, for every piece they play, every time they play it. It's a free practice challenge that runs from November 1st all the way to November 30th. You can find out more information at PIANOVEMBER.com, or I'll have a link in the show notes here at PianoParentPodcast.com/367. But as I said, it's a free practice challenge open to anybody. We have practicers from around the world. We've had practicers in France and Canada, many states across the United States, over in California. Watch out for Leah Drake's studio because they are fierce competitors. Also, Anna Fagan is a traveling teacher. She and her husband are full-time RVers, but she has an active online music studio, so she'll have students practicing from all over the country. My students here in Texas will be practicing. It's just a lot of fun to know that you're not practicing in a bubble. It's not just you by yourself. There are other kids around the world who are also practicing and making improvement at the piano. You can go to PianoVember.com, log in your practice tallies, and check the leaderboard. And for the beginning part of the month, there will only be the top 5 practicers will be visible on the leaderboard. Once we get to the 15th, I'll open it up so you can see the top 10 practicers, the people that have the top 10 most practice tallies so far in the competition. But then the last 5, maybe 7 days of the month of November, I'll open up the entire leaderboard so you can see everybody's practice tallies and you can see where you are in the ranks. And you can make up your own screen name. Maybe mine would be Texas Davis. And so maybe Texas Davis, although this is really for piano kids, not necessarily for teachers, but just for example, maybe Texas Davis has 100 practice tallies, and you, with your name, Cool Piano Kid, you have 110 practice tallies. So Texas Davis sees that, they get 25 more practice tallies. Now all of a sudden they're 15 ahead of you. And then Cool Piano Kid has to go get a few more practice tallies. You can see yourself jumping up in the ranks live. And I think that's a lot of fun. There aren't any prizes other than bragging rights. There is no cost to join. Maybe you could make your own prize if you want to. There are some incentives. I have a practice calendar so that you can keep up with your tallies, and you can download that at PianoVember.com. And new this year, we're putting together a practice calendar that has on this day different things listed for each day of the month of November. For example, November 6th is the birthday of Adolph Sax, who invented the saxophone. Some saxophones have 23 keys. So the goal for November 6th is to see if you can get 23 practice tallies in honor of Saxophone Day. We've got a lot of fun different days throughout the month and objectives to see if you can collect more practice tallies. And all of that, as I said, is at PianoVember.com. And I hope you'll join the fun. All of us together, collectively, our goal is to collect 50,000 practice tallies. I think we've only met that goal one time. I don't remember what year we met that goal, but I hope we can meet that goal this coming year. So do your part, sign up for the challenge, figure out your screen name, and download the calendar and get ready for November 1st to start tracking your practice tallies. No matter what strategy you use, it is extremely important that you do spend time at your piano on the days between lessons. You will be so proud of yourself. You'll be amazed at the things that you can accomplish with that dedicated time. And your teacher is going to be so pleased. They're going to know that they need to bring their A game. This piano kid is practicing, so I better have some new music ready for them to play at the next lesson. Thanks so much for listening. Piano kids, thanks for practicing. Piano parents, thanks for what you do to encourage your piano kid, encourage your piano teacher, and you encourage me just by listening. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.